You've probably heard this sentence before. Maybe you've lived it. Someone looks at you with sincerity, maybe even with tears in their eyes, and says something that doesn't make sense at all. I love you. I don't think we should be together. In that moment, it feels like reality breaks a little because your mind immediately tries to reject it. It feels like two things being forced into one sentence. Love is supposed to mean staying. Love is supposed to mean choosing each other no matter what. So how can someone love you and still walk away? At first, you don't accept it. You question it. You replay their words again and again, trying to find the meaning behind it. Maybe they're confused. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they don't actually know what they feel. Maybe they just don't love you enough. Because that's the explanation, isn't it? It hurts. At least it makes sense. If they didn't love you enough, then leaving becomes logical. If they truly loved you, then why would they go? That's where the real confusion begins. Because deep down, you probably felt their love. It wasn't fake. It wasn't forced. There were moments that felt moments where everything just clicked, where you didn't have to question anything. The way they looked at you, the way they cared, the way they showed up in moments, it all felt genuine. That's what makes it so hard to accept, because you're not just losing a person, you're losing something that actually felt real. Maybe the problem isn't that the love wasn't real. Maybe the problem is that you've been taught an incomplete version of what love actually is. Most of us grow up believing in a simple idea. If you love someone, you stay. If it's real, you fight for it. If it's meant to be, nothing can break it. Anything that doesn't follow this pattern feels wrong. It feels like failure. It feels like someone gave up easily. Real relationships don't always follow simple rules. Real life is messy, complicated, and full of things that love alone cannot fix. Because here's something that most people don't realize until they experience it. Love and compatibility are not the thing. You can love someone deeply, still not be able to build a stable life with them. You can care about someone, still feel constantly misunderstood. You can feel connected to someone emotionally, completely disconnected when it comes to values, goals, or the direction your lives are heading. No matter how strong the feelings or those gaps don't just disappear on their own. Think about how many relationships start with emotion. There's attraction, excitement, curiosity. Everything feels natural in the beginning. You don't think about long-term consequences. You don't analyze every difference. You just feel. For a while, that feeling is enough. As time goes on, reality slowly starts to enter the picture. You start noticing the differences. The way you handle conflict, the way you communicate, the things you prioritize, the way you see the future. At first, these things feel small. You tell yourself they don't matter. We'll figure it out. It's not a deal. Love is more important. Maybe for a while you can ignore it. Over time, those small differences start to grow. Conversations become more complicated. Misunderstandings happen often. Things that once felt easy start to feel heavy. You find yourself in a situation where love is still there, but everything around it feels harder than it should be. This is where one of the biggest illusions about love begins to break. Because we've been taught that if something is right, it should feel easy. That love shouldn't be confusing. That if you're with the person, everything will just flow naturally. So when things start to feel difficult, the first instinct is to question the relationship. Maybe this isn't right. Maybe we're not meant to be. Maybe there's someone out there. But here's the truth that most people avoid. Every relationship will become difficult at some point. The difference is not whether difficulty exists. The difference is whether that difficulty comes from growth or from misalignment. Growth feels uncomfortable. It moves you forward. Misalignment feels exhausting. It keeps repeating the same problems over and over again. If you're not careful, you can confuse the two. You might stay in a relationship thinking you're growing together, when in reality, you're just going in circles. You might believe that love will fix everything, when in reality, love is the thing holding the relationship together. That's not always enough. There comes a point where one or both people start to feel it. That quiet realization that something isn't working the way it should. It's not always loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a feeling, a sense that no matter how much you care about each other, something is off. That's a very difficult place to be in. Because now you're not dealing with a lack of love. You're dealing with a conflict between love and reality. Do you stay because you love them? Do you leave because you know this isn't sustainable? Most people avoid this question for long as possible. They distract themselves. They focus on the moments. They convince themselves that things will change. That somehow with effort, everything will fall into place. Deep down, that question doesn't go away. Eventually, someone has to answer it. This is where one of the decisions in any relationship happens. Because choosing to leave doesn't always mean you stop loving the person. Sometimes it means you care enough to recognize that staying will only cause damage in the long run. From the outside, it doesn't look that way. From the outside, it looks like someone gave up. It looks like someone walked away from something. It looks like a lack of commitment. If you're the one being left, it can feel like rejection, like you weren't enough to make them stay. That's where the pain becomes deeper than just losing the relationship. Because now it's not about them. It becomes about you, your worth, your value, your identity. You start asking questions that have no answers. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't they choose me? The more you think about it, the more it starts to affect how you see yourself. Sometimes it was never about you not being enough. Sometimes it was two people who simply couldn't make it work in a healthy way. That's a very different kind of truth. It's not dramatic. It's not easy to accept. It doesn't give you someone to blame. It's real. Because relationships are not built on love alone. They're built on timing, emotional readiness, shared values, communication, life direction, and a willingness to grow together. If even one of those things is missing in a significant way, it creates friction. Not the kind of friction that leads to growth. The kind that slowly wears everything down. When someone recognizes that they're faced with a painful choice, hope things change, or leave and accept the loss. Neither option is easy. Staying means continuing to struggle with something that isn't working. Leaving means letting go of something that still matters to you. That's why this situation is so complicated. Because no matter what you choose, there is pain. But here's something that changes everything once you truly understand it. Love is not about how strongly you feel. It's about what your presence creates in someone else's life. Does your presence bring peace? Does it bring confusion? Does it create stability? Does it create constant tension? Does it help both of you grow? Does it keep both of you stuck? Because if a relationship is consistently creating pain, then peace, more confusion, then clarity, more struggle than growth, then love on its own is not enough to justify staying. That's a difficult truth to accept, especially when your emotions are still attached. Once you start seeing love this way, something shifts. You stop measuring love by how intense it feels, and you start measuring it by how healthy it is. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let go. Not because you don't care, not because the love wasn't real, because you understand that holding on will only make things worse. That kind of love is not weak. It's actually one of the forms of love there is, because it requires you to put reality above emotion. It requires you to accept loss of avoiding it. It requires you to think about what's best, not what feels good in the moment. Most people are not ready for that. Most people hold on for long. They stay in situations that slowly drain them, hoping that things will magically change. They ignore the signs. They suppress their doubts. They sacrifice their peace for the sake of maintaining the relationship, until eventually something breaks. When it does, it hurts even more than it needed to. That's why understanding this earlier changes everything. It helps you see things clearly. Relationships become clearer. You can tell when something is not working, even if you still have feelings. You can make decisions based on facts, not just emotions. So maybe the real question is not whether someone loved you when they left. Maybe it is, are you willing to understand a version of love that doesn't fit your story? Because once you do, you start to see things. You stop chasing the idea that love always means staying. You stop thinking every ending is a failure. You stop blaming yourself for things you couldn't control. Instead, you start focusing on something deeper. You start focusing on building relationships based on love, on being on the same page, understanding, and growing together. That's what actually creates something lasting. So if you've ever heard those words, I love you, I don't think we should be together, maybe it wasn't as simple as you first thought. Maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe it was someone trying to express a truth that's hard to say and even harder to understand. Maybe, just maybe, it's not a sign that the love wasn't real. Maybe it's a sign that someone understood something about love than most people do. Take a moment. Think about that. If this made you see things differently, share your thoughts. Because sometimes how we understand love determines the kind of relationships we create. Changing that understanding can change everything.